Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, border conflict between nuclear powers China and India heats up. India adding 10,000 troops to guard their disputed border.
I want competition with China, not conflict.
State of the Union speech sparking an uproar across the country. How should we read his comments about China? We tap a national security analyst for more. A U.S. Army soldier facing federal charges for selling top-secret military information to China. More on what exactly he's been allegedly collecting. And a travel alert you can't ignore. 2 U.S. lawmakers pushing a do-not-travel notice for the Xinjiang region. That's to protect Americans from unknowingly contributing to what they're calling atrocity crime. Tensions are soaring at the border between two nuclear powers. India reportedly planning to send 10,000 more troops to its disputed border with China. The goal is to safeguard the region as New Delhi accuses the Chinese Communist Party of not keeping its promises. Beijing responds. Senior Indian officials who declined to be named spoke to Bloomberg on Thursday, saying India has freed up 10,000 soldiers to strengthen its disputed border with China. They will join other 9,000 soldiers already deployed in that region, guarding more than 300 miles of border. India's defense minister said, quote, "Whether from land, air, or sea, if anyone attacks India, our forces will respond firmly." China responded Friday, saying more Indian troops at the border won't ease tensions. The new total of roughly 20,000 Indian soldiers there, plus artillery and strong air support, appears to mark the second largest deployment from the Indian side for decades. In 2021, the Indian government moved 50,000 soldiers to its border with China. That's after a clash the year before killed 20 Indian soldiers. Beijing said 4 Chinese soldiers died. Several areas also saw an even stronger military buildup from the Chinese side, including a military civil dual-use airbase, artillery, and anti-aircraft systems. The border talks haven't really improved the situation. While China often accused the Indian side of insisting on unreasonable demands, India said the tension was caused by unilateral attempts by the Chinese side to alter the status quo. The two countries share a more than 2,000-mile frontier border along the Himalayas. Much of it is not demarcated. Is President Biden underestimating the dangers from the Chinese Communist Party? Here's what he said about his China policy in the State of the Union address Thursday.
I want competition with China, not conflict. And we're in a stronger position to win the conflict of the 21st century against China than anyone else, for that matter, than any time as well.
China owns the largest standing army in the world. That's about twice the size of the U.S., and it's still expanding the military and pouring even more money into it. 2 days ago, China just announced it would increase its defense budget by 7.2% this year. That's over $230 billion. China is also seeking to dominate the satellite communication in space. It plans to send even more satellites into space this year than the U.S. and works to build its own Starlink-like network. The goal, 26,000 pieces. That's almost 5 times more than the current U.S. Starlink. Satellite communication plays a vital role in active conflict zones. It's also been proved to have aided the U.S. military to combat Russia. Back to military development, the U.S. hasn't successfully equipped hypersonic missiles to its fighter jets yet. China and Russia already have them ready in their arsenals. China has also been enhancing military ties with 2 neighbors and U.S. adversaries, Russia and North Korea. And as it endeavors to advance, China poses a major threat to U.S. intellectual property.
I've made sure that the most advanced American technologies can't be used in China.
The U.S. is still investigating reports accusing Chinese companies of helping Iran steal U.S. weapons technology. Just a month ago, Jim Mancuso, the head of a top unit at the Department of Homeland Security, exposed that the agency discovered sensitive materials and U.S. technologies in debris from Iranian weapons. From battlefields in Ukraine and the Middle East, these weapons are used by U.S. adversaries to attack American troops and their allies. To discuss more about Biden's remarks on China during the State of the Union address, we sat down with General Robert Spalding, retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General and author of War Without Rules. General Spalding, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Now, President Biden delivered the State of the Union last night, and he touched on foreign policy, specifically China. I want to play a clip now.
And we're standing up against China's unfair economic practices. We're standing up for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. And we're in a stronger position to win the conflict of the 21st century against China than anyone else, for that matter, than any time as well.
What is your reaction to that?
President Biden, really kept going with a lot of the policies that President Trump implemented during his administration. So I actually applaud him for that. That being said, I think it's very clear that it's been very slow, and it needs to be much more rapid and much more involved. They've shut down things like the Department of Justice going after Chinese nationals who were spying on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. So they've slowed down numerous programs. They haven't done enough in things like fentanyl. So there's a lot more bad news with regard to the border, obviously, and kind of continuous bad news on fentanyl when it comes to Biden. But there's also bad news under Trump. And I think the reason is because the Chinese Communist Party has influenced our corporate sector, our financial sectors, and in turn, those sectors influence politics in Washington, D.C.
Now, if we do see a second Trump term, how do you see Trump handling the China issue?
The Chinese Communist Party basically went all in on Biden in 2020. So I think I can see a Trump administration retaliating against the Chinese Communist Party for that. And I think here the parties go after each other, and the Chinese Communist Party benefits from that. So if you can get somebody that actually understands politics more so than combat, which is where we think national security should be right now, but it's really not. It's in global political warfare, which is what the Chinese Communist Party wages. Then I think we have a better chance, quite frankly, of dealing with the Chinese Communist Party. Because these things like TikTok are a big, big problem, and they are a weapon in that global political warfare campaign.
Quite concerning indeed. General Spalding, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
A U.S. Army soldier in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, now slapped with 6 federal charges, including conspiracy and bribery. A grand jury indicted him Thursday for allegedly stealing top-secret national defense information to someone from China. Prosecutors accuse intelligence analyst Corbijn Schultz of a multi-year conspiracy designed to illegally exploit his access to classified information and trade it for cash. The indictment claims Schultz's conspirator tasked him with gathering information on U.S. plans to respond to a military attack on Taiwan, along with sensitive data and information on the F-22 stealth fighter jet, the Whiskey combat rescue helicopter, the HIMARS rocket system, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. The indictment alleges Schultz took around $42,000 in 14 payments from a conspirator that claimed to live in Hong Kong. Prosecutors say Schultz started disclosing documents, maps, notes, photographs, and plans related to national defense in June of 2022. An agency inside Taiwan's government urged China not to change the status quo on Friday. The call comes amid escalating tensions sparked by Chinese Coast Guard vessels entering Taiwan-controlled waters.
Our Coast Guard has never entered their waters. So under this former tacit understanding, I think we can continue to live together if they don't invade our waters.
The Taiwanese agency handles the island's policy toward China. Beijing started regular Coast Guard patrols around Taiwan's Kinmen Islands last month after 2 Chinese fishermen died trying to flee inspection by Taiwan's Coast Guard. This week, the Chinese regime announced a 7.2% increase in defense spending, a military budget that has more than doubled from 2013. That's on top of officially hardening its stance on Taiwan, with the omission of the phrase peaceful reunification in the budget report. Roaring jets and booming explosions. 137 soldiers from the U.S., Thailand, and South Korea wrapped up the largest annual military drill in Asia on Friday. For Washington, the Cobra Gold exercise is a key platform to shore up alliances in Asia, especially at a time of increasing aggression from the Chinese Communist regime. The Cobra Gold is one of the world's longest-running multilateral military exercises and the biggest in Southeast Asia. A bipartisan push from the U.S. against genocide in the Xinjiang region, or East Turkestan as it's known to its native Uyghur population. Lawmakers are asking the State Department to issue a do-not-travel notice for the region. In a joint letter to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Congressman Chris Smith and Senator Jeff Merkley wrote, "Tourism only serves to whitewash these atrocities, serving the interests of the Chinese Communist Party." Over 1 million Uyghurs, members of an ethnic minority in Xinjiang, have been subjected to mass detention, torture, and forced labor. The U.S. government has labeled it a genocide, and the United Nations considers it a crime against humanity. The lawmakers also sent letters to 3 private travel companies providing trips in Xinjiang, including visits to mosques. The letters point out that these mosques are off limits to Uyghurs seeking to practice their faith, but are being used for tourism. Coming up, concerns about the ongoing southern border crisis are dominating political talks in the U.S., but what's pushing Chinese immigrants to leave their homeland? An English teacher shared her story with NTD.
I've wondered countless times if my mother were born in America, would she still be alive?
Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 mysteriously vanished 10 years ago Friday. Families say they're still holding out hope for answers. Democracy in Hong Kong facing a bleak future. Lawmakers unveiling a draft of a chilling new national security law targeting pro-democracy activists with even tougher penalties. And Hollywood mocked the Red Scare of yesteryear. Now a new NTD documentary is exposing a story the film industry doesn't want you to see. We're on the premiere of Hollywood Takeover after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. What's driving an influx of Chinese nationals to flee their homes, travel thousands of miles, and illegally cross the U.S. border? NTD spoke to an English teacher from central China's Henan province, Lucy Ren, about her story. A year ago, she arrived in the U.S. with her husband and son after a 40-day journey. Here's the story.
Lucy Ren says she was unhappy living under the Chinese Communist Party for years. She explained that the last straw that made her and her husband decide to leave China was an incident involving her 4th grade son's elementary school. Ren recalled what one of her students once told her after watching an anti-US movie.
My student said to me, "I saw the People's Liberation Army couldn't even get some potatoes to eat. And then the American military, they're celebrating Thanksgiving. Wow, feasting like kings. And I just wanted to rush in, kill those American soldiers and grab the food to share with the People's Liberation Army." And other students echoed their agreement. I truly felt deeply saddened.
Ren didn't want her child to be educated with nationalism for the Chinese Communist Party. She told NTD about a tragedy her family had been forced to endure years earlier due to the CCP's infamous one-child policy.
The worst thing is that my mother was forcibly sterilized after giving birth to my brother, and she has been sick ever since. She passed away at the age of 48. I have wondered countless times if my mother had been born in the United States, would she still be alive?
She also offered a message to Chinese people living outside China.
Firstly, we, the overseas community, must not remain silent any longer. We must proactively speak out and let everyone, especially those people outside China, see the true face of the Chinese Communist Party. Secondly, we need to launch a movement to dismantle the wall that the CCP has built. Even if it starts with just one brick at a time, we must gradually work together to tear it down. This means recommending VPNs to our friends and family in China and informing them of the true situation.
People around the globe are now speaking out against the threats posed by the Chinese Communist regime. That says the U.S. faced an unprecedented illegal immigration crisis at the southern border.
10 years after the mysterious disappearance of a Malaysian Airlines flight MH370, families of Chinese passengers on the plane are still looking for the truth about what happened. They held a protest Friday at the entrance to the Malaysian embassy in Beijing.
Our hope is that if he is alive, we need to see him in person. If he is dead, we need to see his body. What happened to the plane? Where did it go? Find the plane as soon as possible.
Malaysia says it's willing to reopen an investigation if compelling new evidence emerges. Flight MH370 disappeared on the way from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing 10 years ago on March 8th with 239 people on board. What happened to the flight has become one of the world's greatest aviation mysteries. Hong Kong is moving to enact harsher penalties against pro-democracy politicians, activists, and anyone deemed to be colluding with so-called foreign forces. Lawmakers published their draft of a new national security law on Friday. The bill includes penalties of up to life in prison for what it labels treason, insurrection, and sabotage. It also proposes 20 years in jail for espionage and 10 years for crimes linked to sharing state secrets and so-called sedition. The bill also proposes extending police detention for individuals arrested without being charged from 48 hours to 14 days. Human rights and media advocacy groups are pushing to get the new punishments for sedition scrapped. That's for their potential to silence journalists and freedom of expression. The European Union says it has grave concerns over the sweeping provisions in the bill and its extraterritorial reach. The U.S. has also expressed concern over the bill's broad and vague definitions of state secrets and external interference. The bill's definition of state secrets includes information tied to military, security, and diplomatic secrets, as well as classified social, economic, and technological information involving the Chinese Communist Party and Hong Kong. Hong Kong leader John Lee has urged lawmakers to fast-track the bill at full speed. Several members of the largely pro-Beijing body said they expect the bill to become law before mid-April. Is the Chinese Communist Party influencing the American film industry? A new NTD documentary investigates. Hollywood takeover China's control in the film industry is released tonight, Friday, on Epic TV. The film premiered at the Harmony Gold Theater in Los Angeles Wednesday night. Here's more on the event and reactions to the film.
I'm in the heart of Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard at the Harmony Gold Theater for the screening of this fantastic NTD original documentary film, Hollywood Takeover. Today, this Hollywood Takeover documentary exposes all of this with the contributors. I'm here speaking to the producers, directors, and the contributors about how this film is shining a light and exposing the Chinese Communist Party and the regime.
NTD host and protagonist of the documentary, Tiffany Meyer, explains how ideological warfare is used as a part of China's military strategy.
Under Xi Jinping, the current chairman of the Communist Party, you have that in the internal PLA, or People's Liberation Army, China's military, part of their internal handbook, that the battle for mind control happens on a smokeless battlefield, happens on the ideological front.
As for why the Chinese regime zeroed in on the entertainment industry,
I think China is smart in that they know stories matter. They understand the power of storytelling.
One of the film's contributors, an award-winning journalist, Christian Toto, cites an example from the TV show Friends.
Rachel's haircut was a sensation. It's just a hairstyle. Nothing, no big deal. But that's the power of pop culture. Just that little, an actress with a beautiful hairstyle can make millions of people go, I need to get that haircut. So that's what stories do. That's what pop culture.
It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. It's not a weapon. It's not a tank. It's not a missile. But it does change hearts and minds. And I think that Chinese officials said, hey, wait a minute, we can do that too. And they're doing it.
The film's producer, Jason Jones, points out that the CCP is running the largest influence campaign in history and calls it inescapable.
You have at least 3 million Uyghur in concentration camps, slave labor, organ harvesting, forced abortions, unspeakable evil. The CCP has said in public record that they have to make the Uyghur the villains and the CCP the victim. Then Disney makes a movie, Mulan, the live-action movie, that paints a caricature of the Uyghur that's grotesque.
After the screening, some audience members described what's happening as a declaration of war on America.
We are at war, and I think that this is just something that's a glaring highlight of how we've actually been at war for quite some time with China infiltrating this country. This is just one of the vehicles that they're using to do it.
This film is very, very interesting. It speaks about the truth. I really feel like we are in war in many ways.
Industry insiders give some analysis on China's unrestricted warfare.
In the West, we often think of war as either you're in war militarily or you're not. It's peace. But that's not how Communist China thinks. It's unrestricted warfare or hybrid warfare. So everything short of what we think of as war. So you have lawfare, like media warfare, information warfare, soft power is where the film industry comes in. You start influencing everything. You start dividing a country so that they tear each other apart.
Now people will understand this is how you're being manipulated and how you're being controlled. Not just in movies, certainly there, but also on social media and so on. So all those different methods are methods of unrestricted warfare. This whole thing, this documentary is just one vector of unrestricted warfare.
Actor Sam Sorbo says Hollywood studios are bending backwards for the Chinese market.
It's called show business, not show, right? And so it's about money. And it's funny because if you talk to them, they will claim that they are not about the money, that they're more about getting messaging across and being good people, and right, that's their whole sort of mantra is we want to save the world and we want to, but ultimately it all boils down to money.
Despite the situation, many also expressed hope for the future.
I hope that the filmmakers who watch this film would better fulfill their social responsibility to the American public and stay truthful, tell truthful stories, and maintain their integrity and not be compromised by money.
Go watch Hollywood take over, and we're going to take our industry back to the United States of America.
This has been an incredibly insightful, incredibly powerful and impactful movie. A must-see. It releases on Epoch TV on March the 8th. An NTD original documentary shining a light and exposing the dark secrets of movie making and the entertainment industry, and how the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated and controlled Hollywood studios behind the scenes. This is a must-see. This has been Ruby Lovell at the screening of Hollywood Takeover.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Coming up on NTD, stay tuned for America's Hope with Kelly Wright. Actor Kevin Sorbo talks about China's efforts to infiltrate Hollywood and details his new film called The Firing Squad. It's based on a true story about Christian persecution. Musician and broadcaster John Tesh also joins the show to share his own dramatic story, a life and death battle with cancer, and how he emerged victorious. That's tonight at 10 p.m. after China in Focus. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.